Northern Ireland, not to be confused with Ireland or Great Britain, is part of the United Kingdom, though that simple statement could start a heated knife fight in certain pubs, so it's best used sparingly. It sits in the northeast corner of the island of Ireland, looking across the Irish Sea towards Scotland, which on a clear day you can apparently see, though most days are less clear. But how did the northern part of Ireland end up in the UK in the first place? It's a fair question, and one that can turn an ordinary dinner conversation into a full-scale political symposium before the main course arrives. To unpack it properly, we have to rewind several centuries. The English and Scottish began planting settlers in Ulster in the early 1600s. This created a Protestant majority in the north, setting the stage for several centuries of tension with the Catholic population, who were understandably less enthusiastic about being colonised. Nothing says welcome to Northern Ireland quite like opening your travel video with a lecture on 17th century colonial policy. Anyway, the Irish War of Independence between 1919 and 1921 resulted in the partition of the island. The Republic of Ireland in the south became self-governing, while Northern Ireland remained part of the United Kingdom. This led to the Troubles in the second half of the 20th century. What started as peaceful protests quickly escalated into riots, bombings, and paramilitary campaigns. The nationalists fought to end British rule and unite Ireland. Loyalist groups fought to stay British. The British Army got involved, officially to keep the peace, though their presence often did the opposite. It was all very tragic and involved far too many victims. But today, luckily, it's a perfectly normal, even charming place to live and travel. Getting to Northern Ireland is surprisingly easy for a place with such complicated identity issues. You can fly into Belfast International Airport or Belfast City Airport, both of which connect to most UK cities and several European ones. Ferries operate from Scotland and Liverpool. By land, you can drive from the Republic of Ireland without any visible border checkpoints, though your phone network will gleefully charge you extra the moment it detects the crossing. The train system works reasonably well, and the buses are punctual enough to make Londoners jealous. Northern Ireland attracts 5 million visitors a year, which is impressive for a region not much larger than Yorkshire. Most come for the Giant's Causeway, others come for Game of Thrones filming locations. The Causeway Coastal Route from Belfast to Derry is marketed as one of the world's great drives. The terrain consists primarily of lowlands, with upland areas distributed around the edge. Northern Ireland has a temperate maritime climate. What does that mean in practice? Rain, of course, and cloud cover. Sometimes sunshine that arrives unexpectedly and departs before anyone can fully appreciate it. Around 2 million people live here, and the capital is Belfast. The rest of the region includes 6 counties: Antrim, Armagh, Down, Fermanagh, Londonderry and Tyrone. Culturally, Northern Ireland is a paradox. Friendly but cautious, hospitable but deeply aware of context. Small talk remains a minefield. Asking "where are you from?" can still function as a coded political question, so proceed with tact. Economically, the region's doing, not great, not terrible. Better than during the Troubles, but worse than it could be. Tech firms have arrived and tourism has grown. Belfast sits on the eastern coast of Northern Ireland, at the mouth of the River Legan, where it spills into Belfast Lough. Lough is the Irish word for lake, although in this case it's not really a lake at all, but a watery inlet. The city is backed by a ring of hills, most notably Cave Hill, which is said to have inspired Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. 350,000 people live in Belfast. This makes it the largest city in Northern Ireland and the second largest on the Irish island, after Dublin. Belfast wasn't always about political tension and murals. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was a titan of industry: linen, rope, tobacco and shipbuilding, particularly at the Harland and Wolff shipyard. The Titanic was built here in 1912. Belfast built the ship, the iceberg did the rest. It's become a kind of running joke. She was fine when she left here. That industrial might made Belfast rich, but also tense. Catholics worked the mills, Protestants ran them, and social segregation was an unspoken civic art form. The peace walls, or peace lines, depending on who you're talking to, are physical barriers built to separate predominantly Catholic and predominantly Protestant neighbourhoods. The first ones went up in 1969 as temporary measures. Over half a century later, they're still there. There are over 100 of these walls and barriers throughout Belfast, some stretching up to 8 metres high. They're made of brick, steel, iron, and in some cases concrete topped with metal sheeting to make the piece extra strong. Is Belfast safe to visit? Yes, absolutely. The vast majority of visitors experience no issues whatsoever. The residual tensions are largely political rather than violent, and tourist areas are completely normal. You're far more likely to be run over by a car while taking a selfie than by any sectarian activity. But if you spot a pub called Car Bomb Cafe or Marching Season, maybe just keep walking. The River Legan runs through the city, which historically provided the water power and transport links necessary for Belfast's industrial development. Speaking of which, the Legan was once so polluted from linen manufacturing and shipbuilding that you could probably have walked across it on the accumulated industrial waste. But why do people actually visit Belfast now? First, there's the gilt tourism factor. British and Irish visitors particularly seem drawn to destinations that combine leisure with a vague sense of educational obligation. Second, the Titanic. Belfast's relationship with the Titanic is fascinating from a marketing perspective. Most cities would perhaps downplay their association with one of history's most infamous maritime disasters. Belfast built an entire tourism industry around it. There's even a Titanic museum. Then there's Game of Thrones. A substantial portion of the HBO series was filmed in Northern Ireland, including locations around Belfast. This has resulted in an entire subsidiary tourism economy based on people wanting to stand where fictional dragons once stood, or more accurately, where green screens once stood that were later digitally replaced with fictional dragons. The M1 motorway connects Belfast to Dublin. Road quality in Northern Ireland is generally good. Parking in Belfast is annoying and expensive. Consider whether you actually need the car once you're there, since the city centre is very walkable. Lodging in Belfast ranges from the genuinely luxurious to the determinedly budget. Location matters more than you might think. Staying in the Cathedral Quarter puts you near nightlife, but far from Titanic Quarter. Staying near Queen's University puts you near the Botanic Gardens, but requires transport to the city centre. Staying in the Titanic Quarter puts you near the museum, but in an area that's essentially deserted after 6 p.m. Before we continue, please push the like button to help this video reach a wider audience. The Giant's Causeway is Northern Ireland's greatest tourist attraction. It's a natural wonder, a UNESCO site and the only rock formation in the world that could be used as a Minecraft tutorial. You can find it on the north coast of County Antrim, near the town of Bushmills. There are 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, formed some 50 to 60 million years ago, during a time when the Earth was very hot. Yes, the Giant's Causeway is not man-made. Despite looking suspiciously like an abandoned Roman project, it's a geological accident. Lava from ancient volcanic fissures cooled too quickly, cracked neatly, and created hexagonal rocks everywhere. You arrive here expecting serenity, and instead you get a visitor centre, a shuttle bus, and someone in a North Face jacket explaining volcanic activity like it's a TED Talk. But of course, the science isn't enough for humans. We needed a myth. According to legend, Finn McCool, a legendary Irish warrior, built the causeway to cross the sea to Scotland and fight his Scottish rival, Benandonna. And here's where Northern Irish tourism really shines. They don't try to pick between science or myth, they just sell both. You can learn about volcanic basalts and ancient superheroes in the same brochure. That's balance. The causeway itself is impressive, of course. You walk down from the car park, past the cliffs, past the signs reminding you that rocks can be slippery, and there it is, a natural staircase into the Atlantic. The columns rise and fall like a frozen wave. Each block has a different height and shape. And yet there's something hypnotic about it. Maybe it's the repetition, maybe it's the Atlantic wind gently exfoliating your face. The cliffs surrounding the causeway are named the Giant's Organ, the Chimney Stacks, and the Shepherd's Steps. Right, they sound like props from an amateur fantasy novel. The visitor centre is a sleek turf-roofed building full of educational panels and overpriced raincoats. You can even buy a chunk of polished basalt to commemorate your visit, which is ironic, since you could just pick one up outside. Tourism-wise, the causeway is a heavyweight. Over 1 million travellers go there every year. Getting there is easy enough. Just drive along the Antrim Coast, past cliffs that look straight out of a BBC crime drama, but be careful, the road's winding and you don't want to become part of the local folklore. The Causeway Hotel sits right beside the site. It's a Victorian relic with views of the sea and a menu that hasn't changed since before Brexit. The nearby town of Bushmills has more accommodation options. As for the experience itself, the trick is timing. Go early, before the crowds, when the place still feels otherworldly rather than like a school field trip. Or go late, when the light hits the columns and everything glows slightly gold. Though be warned, it'll probably also be raining sideways. Just a few kilometres southwest of the Giant's Causeway, you'll find another highlight of the region, Dunluce Castle. Built in the 13th century by the Macquillans, it later passed to the Macdonalds. The Macdonalds were, to put it delicately, opportunists. When the Spanish Armada came to grief off the Irish coast in 1588, several ships wrecked nearby. The Girona, a galleass carrying significant treasure and 1,300 men, went down near the Giant's Causeway. Most of those men did not survive. The treasure, however, was salvageable. Sawley Boy MacDonnell, a name so good I refuse to believe it's real, was rumoured to have helped himself to a portion of these spoils. Some of this wealth reportedly funded improvements to Dunluce. In 1639, a portion of Dunluce Castle's kitchen collapsed into the sea. During a dinner party with the kitchen staff inside, several servants were killed, a literal case of too many cooks spoil the castle. The Countess of Antrim, understandably upset, refused to live there afterward. To reach the castle from the mainland, one crosses a bridge. In medieval times, this would have been a drawbridge, retractable in case of attack. Today, it's a fixed wooden bridge, maintained by the heritage authorities. The gap it spans is rather alarming if you look straight down. Dunluce is not merely a ruin, it's an ongoing archaeological project. Excavations have revealed that the headland was occupied long before the castle, possibly as far back as the 5th or 6th century. The associated town, located across the mainland from the castle, has been the subject of significant investigation. Streets, houses, and evidence of commercial activity have been uncovered, suggesting that Dunluce was, briefly, something approaching urban. What happened to this town? It was abandoned. Nobody's entirely certain why. The kitchen collapse probably didn't help. The general decline of the MacDonald fortunes didn't help either. By the late 17th century, the castle was no longer a primary residence, and the town had dwindled to nothing. Would I recommend visiting the castle? Of course. Would I recommend leaning too far over the edge for a better view? Absolutely not. Derry/Londonderry. Already a footnote before the first sentence. It's the second largest city in Northern Ireland and a city with two names. Nationalists generally say Derry. Unionists use Londonderry. This is not a rule, but it's a reliable trend. Which name do you prefer? Let us know in the comments. The city sits in the northwest of the island of Ireland, which already places it slightly off-centre in every sense that matters. Not quite Atlantic-facing, not quite inland. The Republic of Ireland presses in immediately to the west and north. 1 minute you're in Northern Ireland, the next you're not. Yet, over 300,000 people travel there every year. Derry has the only complete set of city walls remaining in Ireland, as locals will inform you 5 seconds after you arrive. Constructed between 1613 and 1619, the walls were built by the Honourable the Irish Society. It was a London-based organisation whose name suggests a charitable endeavour, but whose actual purpose was rather more colonial in nature. The London in Londonderry derives from this period, which explains both the name and why roughly half the population refuses to use it. Below the walls lies the Bogside, famous for its murals and for rather more tragic reasons. The Free Derry corner still stands at Lecky Road, its gable end painted with the words, "You are now entering Free Derry." This is where the Bloody Sunday events occurred in 1972. 14 unarmed Catholic civilians were shot by the British Army. The Troubles left their mark quite literally upon these streets. The murals here, often called the People's Gallery, depict various moments from the conflict, with a directness that British textbooks historically preferred to avoid. The Peace Bridge, completed in 2011, spans the River Foyle and connects the historically Protestant waterside with the historically Catholic city side. It's a pedestrian and cyclist bridge, and is aesthetically speaking quite nice. Does a bridge resolve centuries of sectarian division? Obviously not. Does it provide a nice walking route and rather good views? It does that. The Foyle itself is surprisingly wide at this point. Surprising if you'd assumed it was a modest river based on nothing but vague geographical prejudice. It's actually substantial. Boats can and do use it. Street parking in Derry is almost impossible. You should leave the car in Drumahoe or at the Foyleside car park and walk in like a civilised human. The whole city isn't large. You can walk from the Bogside to the fountain in under half an hour. Everything worth seeing is inside the walls or a 5-minute stroll outside them. There are 14 million rope bridges in the world, but Carrick-a-Rede, suspended above the North Antrim coast like a horizontal ladder, is perhaps the only one that charges you 15 quid for the privilege of facing your own mortality. The bridge spans roughly 20 metres. It connects the mainland to a small island, also called Carrick-a-Rede, which translates from Irish as rock in the road. The island is indeed a rock, and it's very much in the way. Of what? Of salmon, apparently, which is why fishermen originally strung up a rope bridge here some 350 years ago. The current bridge is sturdier than it appears. Metal now reinforces the whole affair. The National Trust, who run this operation with characteristic efficiency and characteristic pricing, assure visitors it's perfectly safe. It sways, though. That's the thing. Wind comes off the Atlantic with huge force, and the bridge responds to this force by moving. 500,000 travellers cross the bridge every year. Children, predictably, find the whole thing hilarious. They bounce, their parents freeze halfway, gripping the rope railings. The views are, admittedly, spectacular. The crossing takes about 30 seconds if you're moving normally. The return journey? Yes, because you do have to come back, there's no helicopter, somehow feels longer. What's on the island? Not much in terms of infrastructure. A small building, rocks, some birds. You can see Scotland on clear days. Rathlin Island is visible, which is Northern Ireland's only inhabited offshore island. Arrival before 10 in the morning or after 3 in the afternoon is strongly advisable. Between those hours, you'll spend more time standing in line than actually crossing anything. The bridge closes in high winds. You should check before you travel. The fishermen, incidentally, no longer use the island. Salmon stocks declined, but the bridge remained, suspended between irrelevance and reinvention. The town of Armagh sits among gentle hills and farmland, which is very typical Ulster countryside. It's part of what's called the Cathedral City area within the modern Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon District Council. Armagh is small. This is not an insult. It is a measurement. It is also a premise. If one expects a metropolis, disappointment will arrive early and stay late. To call Armagh historic would be an understatement. This place has more ecclesiastical history per square metre than most countries have in total. St. Patrick himself supposedly established his main church here in the 5th century. It's been a seat of power, faith and theological squabbling ever since. Armagh is basically an ongoing argument about who owns holiness, the Catholics or the Protestants. Its role as an early Christian centre is not a marketing slogan, it is a documented condition. The town's biggest claim to fame, not one, but 2 cathedrals dedicated to St. Patrick, both within walking distance, both impressive, and both, let's be honest, a little redundant. The Catholics have their Gothic revival masterpiece on one hill. It's grand, pointed, with high ceilings, stained glass, and a clear axial focus toward the altar. This cathedral holds the title of primatial seat of all Ireland for the Roman Catholic Church. The Church of Ireland Cathedral sits on another hill. It's older, more restrained, and very Protestant in its understatement. Together they create a skyline that looks like the result of a religious arms race. Between the cathedrals, the streets are lined with Georgian terraces. British planning ideals were applied here with earnestness and competence. The town plan follows the traditional 18th century preference for order and visibility. The roads are steep, the pavements uneven, and anyone attempting a sightseeing walk learns quickly that Armagh was not designed for flat-footed travellers. The surrounding landscape is agricultural and persistent in its greenness. The general atmosphere is tidy, quiet, and somewhat formal. Armagh is not a place that aims to entertain. It prefers to educate. If you're hoping for wild nightlife, lower those expectations. The pubs are friendly, of course, but you get the sense that revelry is tolerated rather than encouraged. The cultural complexion of Armagh is, like much of Northern Ireland, complicated. The city itself has a slight Catholic majority. The surrounding county is more mixed. There are murals and flags. There is history that remains, in many ways, unresolved. From Belfast, the drive takes roughly an hour. From Dublin, the journey is closer to 90 minutes, assuming a clean run up the M1. Buses are the primary public transport option. Services run from Belfast, Dublin, Portadown and surrounding towns. There is no train station in Armagh. There used to be one, but it closed in 1957. Lough Neagh is that huge body of water in the middle of Northern Ireland. It's the largest lake by surface area in the British Isles, and arguably one of the least flashy bodies of water on Earth. The lake sits more or less in the centre of Northern Ireland, touching 5 of the 6 counties. It covers 392 square kilometres and supplies around 40% of Northern Ireland's drinking water. Lough Neagh, despite being absolutely massive in surface area, is embarrassingly shallow. The average depth is just 9 metres. Maximum depth is perhaps 30 metres in the deepest bits. According to legend, Finn McCool, yes, him again, Northern Ireland's favourite giant, was having a disagreement with a Scottish giant, as one does. He scooped up a piece of earth to lob at him. He missed, of course, and the hole left behind filled with water, becoming Lough Neagh. The bit he threw landed in the sea and became the Isle of Man, which is a plausible way of explaining island formation without involving plate tectonics. Lough Neagh is famous for eels. Due to its size and the rivers feeding into it, the lake became prime eel territory. The Lough Neagh Fishermen's Cooperative Society has been operating since 1965, and eel fishing remains commercially important to this day. Right now, the lake is suffering from repeated outbreaks of toxic blue-green algae blooms that have severely degraded water quality and made contact with the water hazardous in places. Even if the water looks clear, the toxins can linger after the bloom dies off. So, unless you enjoy the thrill of mild poisoning and an itchy weekend, give it a miss. Getting there is really easy. It's hard not to get there. Drive in almost any direction long enough and you'll hit it, probably by accident. There are walking trails, boat tours, and plenty of scenic laybys. Do you think the 2 islands should reunite again? Leave a comment and let us know. If you enjoyed this video, please push the like button and subscribe to World Travel Guide.